Something is happening right now in the Pacific Ocean that most people have never heard of, and by the time winter arrives, you're going to feel it in a way that will be very difficult to ignore. Scientists are tracking the development of what could become the most powerful El Niño event in recorded history. They are calling it a super El Niño, and the chain reaction it is, already setting off across the global atmosphere, is reshaping the weather forecast for every corner of the planet, including right where you live. Before we go any further, let us make one thing clear. This is not a story about things getting warmer everywhere at once. This is actually about the opposite in some places. The same ocean warming that is pushing global temperatures toward record territory is also setting up the exact conditions that can bring some of the harshest, most bitter winters in recent memory to the United States and the United Kingdom. That is the part that seems impossible until you understand the science behind it. El Niño is a natural climate pattern. Every few years, the surface of the eastern equatorial Pacific Ocean warms significantly above its average temperature. That pool of warm water is not just sitting there doing nothing. It pumps enormous amounts of heat energy into the atmosphere above it, and that energy radiates outward and reshapes weather patterns across the entire planet. Think of the Pacific Ocean as an enormous engine. During an El Niño, that engine is running at full power, and its exhaust reaches every corner of the globe. A super El Niño is a different beast entirely. Scientists define it by sea surface temperature anomalies in the central and eastern Pacific rising more than 2 degrees Celsius above the long-term average. That does not sound like much until you translate the sheer scale of the ocean involved. The area of warm water covers millions of square miles, and the heat stored within it dwarfs anything released by individual weather events like storms or heat waves. There have been only a handful of truly super-level El Niño events in modern recorded history. And the last one peaked in 2015 to 2016 and contributed to what was, at that time, the warmest year ever measured on Earth. As of right now, in 2026, the data coming in from NOAA, ECMWF, and other major forecasting institutions is alarming. La Niña, the cool phase of the same climate cycle, has officially collapsed. A powerful westerly wind burst has pushed an enormous oceanic Kelvin wave across the Pacific toward the eastern basin. Subsurface ocean temperatures are rising rapidly. The European ECMWF model, which is considered the most reliable long-range forecast system in the world, is now showing a 98% chance of at least a moderate El Niño developing, an 80% chance of a strong El Niño, and a 20 to 25% chance of a full super El Niño status by late 2026 into 2027. NOAA has independently placed the probability of an El Niño developing at 61%, with a 1 in 4 chance it becomes strong, multiple independent. Modeling systems are pointing in the same direction. Something very large is building beneath the surface of the Pacific. The ECMWF is flagging one particular detail that is sending signals through the scientific community. The development of this event appears to be unusually rapid. Experts describe the speed of this transition from La Niña to El Niño as possibly unprecedented in the era of modern observations. The reason is the presence of abnormally warm waters sitting at depth in the western Pacific, combined with powerful westerly winds that are accelerating the surfacing of that heat. When this much energy moves this fast, the atmospheric response tends to be larger and more disruptive than in slower developing events. Now here is where it gets complex, and where the question most people are asking starts to make sense. If the planet is getting warmer because of El Niño, why are scientists warning that the UK and USA could face colder and more severe winters? The answer lies in what El Niño does to the polar vortex. The polar vortex is a massive column of spinning cold air that normally sits locked over the Arctic. When it is strong and stable, it keeps Arctic air contained in the polar regions, away from the populated mid-latitudes. But when the polar vortex is disrupted or weakened, that containment fails. Cold polar air spills southward, and it does not trickle, it floods. El Niño events, particularly super El Niño events, are known to weaken the polar vortex through a specific chain of events. The extra heat energy pumped into the atmosphere by the warming Pacific reshapes global pressure patterns. This sends powerful atmospheric waves upward into the stratosphere, the layer of the atmosphere sitting 10 to 50 kilometers above the surface. Those waves cause rapid heating of the stratosphere, a process called sudden stratospheric warming. And when the stratosphere warms suddenly, the vortex above it loses its structure. Its tight circular rotation breaks down. Cold air that was locked in the Arctic starts leaking into North America and Europe. We already saw this exact mechanism play out in early 2026. A confirmed stratospheric warming event occurred in January and February, causing the polar vortex to split and collapse. The cold air that escaped sent temperatures plunging across the United States and contributed directly to the conditions that produced Winter Storm Fern, the 2,000-mile monster storm that buried 30 states under snow and ice, knocked out power for over 1 million Americans simultaneously and left more than 50 people dead. That event was a preview. Scientists studying the link between El Niño and polar vortex behavior are warning that as the El Niño strengthens through the rest of 2026, the risk of repeated polar vortex disruptions during the coming winter of 2026 into 2027 rises significantly. Analysis from Severe Weather Europe, drawing on reanalysis data from decades of past super El Niño winters, confirms that low Arctic sea ice combined with El Niño conditions is one of the most reliable predictors of a weakened polar vortex. And right now, Arctic sea ice is sitting at near record low levels for this time of year, tying with 2025 for the lowest winter peak in the satellite record. The conditions needed to drive repeated polar vortex disruptions are stacking up one by one. For the United States, the implications for the coming winter are significant. Historical super. El Niño winters show colder than average temperatures across the southern and eastern parts of the country, with increased snowfall in the western states, the southern plains, and up through the Midwest. The southern states, which are least equipped to handle severe winter conditions, consistently see some of the worst outcomes in strong El Niño winters. The deadly impact of Winter Storm Uri in 2021 and Winter Storm Fern in 2026 both occurred during periods of elevated Pacific Ocean temperatures and polar vortex disruption. Neither event was a coincidence. For the United Kingdom, the picture is more nuanced but still significant. The Met Office has acknowledged that warmer Pacific waters associated with El Niño can tilt conditions toward colder seasonal outcomes in Britain. Historical El Niño winters show that the jet stream, the band of fast-moving air that drives most of the UK's weather, shifts position under El Niño influence. The displaced jet stream allows blocking high-pressure systems to build over or near Greenland. And when those blocking systems lock in place, cold Arctic air is redirected southward directly into the British Isles rather than being swept away toward the north. Past El Niño events in 1997 and 2015 both produced notable cold snaps and disrupted seasonal patterns across the UK and Ireland. Meanwhile, at the global level, the heat picture is accelerating in a way that scientists describe as deeply concerning. Carbon Brief's latest quarterly analysis of global temperatures confirms that 2026 is virtually certain to finish as one of the 4 hottest years ever recorded. There is a 19% chance it breaks the all-time record set in 2024. The first 3 months of 2026 were the 4th warmest in the historical record going back to 1850. And climate scientists are clear that the El Niño building in the Pacific will push global temperatures even higher through the second half of the year, with the full impact on annual averages likely peaking in 2027. Some models are projecting something that would have seemed unthinkable not long ago. A small but non-zero number of climate projections are showing global average temperatures briefly touching 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels as the super El Niño peaks. The world only crossed the 1.5 degree threshold for the first time in 2024. Moving toward 2 degrees within a single El Niño event cycle would represent a speed of warming that has no modern precedent. A December 2025 study added another layer of concern. Researchers found that a super El Niño can trigger what they called climate regime shifts, sudden and persistent changes in a climate system that do not simply reverse when the event ends. They found specific evidence that after the 2015 to 2016 super El Niño, the Gulf of Mexico reached a new, sustained level of warmth that may have contributed to stronger and more destructive hurricanes along the Gulf Coast in the years that followed. If the 2026 event is as strong as current forecasts suggest, the downstream effects on ocean temperatures, storm intensity, and seasonal weather patterns could persist not just through 2027, but for years beyond it. The broader backdrop makes all of this more serious. The United States just came off 2025, a year in which 23 separate billion-dollar weather disasters struck the country, killing 276 people and causing $115 billion in damage. Climate scientists note that 2025 was the 15th consecutive year with an above-average number of these major events. The last 10 of those 15 years were dramatically worse than the decade before them. This is not a streak of bad luck. It is a structural shift in the baseline risk that every American and every British family now lives with. So what does all of this mean practically? It means that the coming winter of 2026 into 2027 needs to be taken seriously well before the first cold front arrives. Super El Niño winters have a documented track record of producing extreme events, disrupting power grids, and affecting communities that believe they are safe from severe cold. It means that polar vortex warnings, when they come, should be acted on immediately rather than dismissed as alarmism. And it means that the connection between a warming Pacific Ocean and a freezing winter on your street is not a contradiction. It is exactly how the climate system works when it is pushed this hard. The planet is not warming evenly, smoothly, or predictably. It is being destabilized. And a super El Niño amplifying on top of an already warming world is one of the clearest signals yet of just how far that destabilization has already gone. There is one more thing worth understanding clearly. Scientists are not issuing these warnings to frighten people. They are issuing them because the data demands it. The ECMWF model, NOAA, Carbon Brief, and every major independent climate research institution in the world are reading the same ocean temperatures and arriving at the same conclusions. This is not a fringe prediction or a worst-case outlier. This is what the mainstream scientific consensus looks like right now. The question is not whether a super El Niño will reshape weather across the UK and USA. The forecasts are already telling us that is coming. The question is how prepared individuals, communities, and governments are willing to be before it arrives. Because if the winter of 2026 into 2027 delivers what the science says it might, the people who paid attention to this story will be far better positioned than the people who dismissed it as something too big and too far away to matter. It starts in the Pacific. It ends on your doorstep. And the window to prepare is closing faster than most people realize. Science has spoken. The ocean data is clear. The atmospheric models are aligned. What happens next depends entirely on whether the people who need to hear this message actually listen to it in time. Do not wait for the snow to start falling before you take this